Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with all the latest on books, events, gear, festivals, fitness, health, trails, and more. This podcast is number 53, and it's going live on May the 22nd. Or the 22nd. It always threw me off as a child, not that it was second instead of tooth, but why? I was real popular with the teachers. It was another week of my son shadowing me to find out about my work. He was editing video and audio this week and doing mundane stuff like charging equipment. This media thing isn't all glamour. Actually, come to think of it, none of it is. Let's get on to May the 22nd. It's Sherlock Holmes Day, World Goth Day, Road Trip Day, although not with travel costs spiralling, it probably isn't, and it's Walk Safely to School Day. Seeing as my son's school is more than 4 miles away, along a busy road with no sidewalks, not really an option. When I was in high school or secondary school, I didn't even need to cross a road. I could see it from my bedroom window. Here's an interesting one. In 1816, there were riots in England over high unemployment and the cost of food. How times don't change. We're not at riots yet, but food prices are definitely getting higher. You have to shop really quickly now because the price when you put the item in your cart might not be the price by the time you pay for it. It's the day in 1906 a patent was given to the Wright brothers for a flying machine. It's the day Ceylon changed its name to Sri Lanka, and that was in 1972. It's the day in 1990 that South and North Yemen became Yemen. Birthdays of people you may have heard of include the composer Wagner in 1813, Arthur Conan Doyle, hence Sherlock Holmes Day, in 1859, and possibly the greatest actor of our time, Laurence Olivier, in 1907. On that very same day in 1907, Hergé, the illustrator of Tintin. I had a Belgian friend who used to get very irritated whenever I would say Tintin, which made me do it all the more. Also, George Best, the greatest football or soccer player that I ever saw play in person, was born in 1946. There are actually quite a lot more, but you watch next week, there won't be any that I recognise. Speaking of George Best, who was from Northern Ireland, last week we talked about Northern Ireland and the new Peace Camino. This week we're headed back to the US for a conversation about a job, that of travel coach. And that is a new one on me, so we'll find out all about it shortly. Before we get going, if you do have news, guests, or even subjects to cover, or comments, or you want to advertise, please get in touch via walkingpost.com or just email me directly at jim@walkingpost.com. Okay, let's go through some of the headlines of the news articles you may have missed that we had on walkingpost.com in this past week. A £3.2 million bridge in Radcliffe opened to improve access and reconnect communities. Academics are helping hotel guests to go digital free with hand-drawn maps, just like the good old days. And a Nordic walking scheme in Ribble Valley is looking for participants. RSVR debuted its hydration system, and there's a new interactive trail celebrating the pencil-making history of a district in Nottingham. In the US, the organisation Leave No Trace is providing free materials to celebrate 250 years of America's public lands. A new wearable device provides cooling and heating technology, although not at the same time. And the Outdoor Innovation Award winners were announced. And you can read all of these and more at walkingpost.com. Okay, let's get to this week's conversation. I heard from a hiker and lover of the outdoors in California who changed jobs and has trained as a travel coach. I've heard of life coaches, but never a travel coach. And so Courtney Rosiak Quinto can tell us more. Hi, Courtney. So good of you to join us and tell us about travel coaches and your own personal journey. So, what's a travel coach?
So, a travel coach is a really interesting and new concept. A lot of people will think that we are what you would consider like a travel agent or a travel advisor. And the real difference between the two is strictly legal and licensing, in the sense that a travel agent or a travel advisor can actually physically do bookings for a client. A travel coach is approaching it more from the mental wellness aspect. And so, a lot of us that are travel coaches will actually specialize in certain things. For me, it's women who are leaving their corporate lives to pivot into a new career and using travel, scheduling travel in a way that it's actually purposeful and meaningful, allowing them to expand. And so, you'll get travel coaches that work with that for disruptors in life, such as like being diagnosed with cancer and like having like a terminal life sentence. And so they're like working with the client to like live out travel dreams. So it's been a really interesting way for me to combine my background in psychology. I always thought I was going to be a marriage family therapist. I did not go that route, but here I am again in my next chapter, my second chapter of life, revisiting this topic I was passionate about as a student and utilizing that opportunity to help connect women themselves in a way that is a little different than most people think about when they travel, which I know we'll talk about in a bit. In the coaching world is just so interesting because it is a little bit of the wild, wild west, but there are certifications, which I am ICF certified, of course, but it allows me to practice that piece of the, I won't say therapist because that's a very different thing. Again, that's like a very medical perspective of a person. It allows me to practice helping people grow and helping people transition, which is really what I wanted to do to begin with. And so it's funny. People are always like, this is so new for me. And I'm like, no, it's not. I was in high school and I was taking peer counseling classes. I was learning how to have conversations. I was learning how to, follow a client through a problem that they had from a very young age. I just never acted on it in my career until now.
And so, what was it that made you decide, okay, I'm going to do this? Because that's not what you were doing beforehand.
No, no, it's not. I think that I will try to keep this somewhat short, but I think really COVID had a profound effect on me, as it did for a lot of people. And it gave me this opportunity to truly pause and ask, am I doing work that is aligned with what I want to leave in terms of the legacy and the impact that I have on the world? I found out that was not the case. I briefly mentioned I worked in the music industry. So I worked for a large corporation that hosts a online music service. And I loved that work until I didn't. And then once I didn't, and COVID was taking its toll on us as a society, I had to ask myself, like, what do you want? You have this opportunity to truly, completely pivot at this point. I had an 18-year career with this corporation, and I had to follow something that I felt was calling me. And so I did. I stepped into the unknown. It was the scariest thing I've ever done, and will continue to tell people it's very scary, but very worth it on the other side. And I just followed this calling to help other people. As I've gone through that, of course, I found that there's a certain group of people that I can really truly help. And that's the people, the women who are in a situation that I was in like 3 or 4 years ago, and being able to help them make this transition, but do it in a really meaningful, purposeful way where they can do it through travel, where we have all these exceptional experiences in general.
Obviously, though, you don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be a travel coach and
Mm-mm.
now I'm going to get business cards printed. Clearly, there must be some kind of like you have to
Oh, yeah.
learn, I would imagine.
Yeah, so ICF certifications, they're all structured a little bit differently, but ICF certifications help put the framework around coaching and so that you're understanding how to operate ethically. So I certainly went through my certification program. As I mentioned before, being even a student in high school where I was taking peer counseling classes because I thought, therapy and psychology, that was going to be my path. So it's like I basically took this piece of me from college and high school, I paused it, and then I was able to pick it back up. And when I came and picked it back up, and I decided, okay, this is actually something I'm interested in. there's so many different coaches out there. I'm like, is there such a thing as a travel coach? Is there somebody who, helps people set up their travel in a way that they can execute it for a really meaningful purpose? So not just traveling to do the thing. I'm quite vocal in my coaching business that like I actually subscribe to a model of sustainable and regenerative travel. So I'm not interested in sending people to large corporation hotels where they're behind resort walls. No, we're talking about like really getting out into the culture, understanding the people, understanding, using the lifespan that we've had up to that point to help us understand a new portion of ourself by immersing ourselves in something different. And so, and regenerative tourism is so much more than that, but like that's been my kind of overall model is, how can I get people to have an experience that will be able to change them for the better, for the people that are seeking that, of course. So yes, there is a whole certification program that you have to go through. I'm lucky that I stumbled upon it, and that there is somebody offering this out there. So that gives guardrails for the industry. But yeah, it just took this like bit of curiosity for me being like, could I do this? I don't know. Is there a way to combine travel and my views of travel with, the life changes and then certainly, my background of understanding the human psyche. It all kind of came together in this lovely mix for me.
Who benefits from travel coaching? Why would you
Mm.
employ one, I guess?
With the various different types of coaching that there is, a coach is really going to walk alongside you. And so a person who can benefit, they may not know that a travel coach is the right option for them. We often hear people who are like, I want something more. I'm seeking something more. They're probably not realizing like, if I went out and I did this kind of crazy thing that Courtney's telling me to do or encouraging me to do or encouraging me to explore, then like they may not realize that. And so it's my job to help them see how adventure travel, which is my specific activity. It's my job to help them see how something that's truly adventurous can help them down their path. Then there's a group of people that are like, I absolutely want to get out. I absolutely, want to go and do this thing, climb Kilimanjaro, something like that. And they'll find us just because they're like, okay, I want to do this, but I don't want to do it like just to do it. Like I want there to be meaning behind it. And so it's been a really interesting journey to help educate people about the difference between coaching and therapy and travel advisors, like people who just book the travel and stuff like that. So it's the people who are benefiting are often the ones who are the most curious, who want to have some sort of sensical meaning behind their travel, something that can help them grow as a person. To your question of who would employ one, I think it's such a new concept that I don't think people realize that we're out there and that we can help with these sorts of things. And so it's great to be able to talk a little bit more about the industry in general to help people realize that there is a need, and travel is not so much about going and checking the thing off the checkbox. It really does truly transform us.
So with something like, just as an example, you mentioned Kilimanjaro. If somebody said, I want to climb Kilimanjaro or I want to do
Mm,
the Inca Trail, obviously
mhm.
you're not a travel agent. You don't say, okay,
Correct.
here's the plane you get on and
Mhm.
this is the hotel you stay at. What kind of role would you play in that
Yes.
process?
Yeah, so it's, for lack of a better word at this point, it's almost like a spiritual guide in the sense that like you're walking alongside this person, you're asking, okay, why is it that you want to go and you want to climb Kilimanjaro? What is it about the Inca Trail? What's calling you there? And helping them get a little bit deeper into themselves of like, why is that? And sometimes people don't know. And sometimes people are like, oh gosh, like I only wanted to do the Inca Trail because I saw it on social media and like I thought it'd be a fun thing to do. And suddenly now I'm kind of like realizing maybe that's not what I need. Maybe I'm craving something different. So helping them get to that root cause of what it is behind the adventure that they're seeking, that's what I'm certainly opening up for these people. But you're absolutely right. It's very different than like, okay, here's your plane ticket. We are legally not allowed to do that. It's more walking alongside them to help them dig into exactly what it is that they're seeking and who they're trying to become.
And does your involvement vary according to, like, you wouldn't
Mm.
go with them to do the Inca Trail, or would you?
I love that you're asking this question because yes, so part I have the coaching business in general, but part of what I'm finding is that the in-person experience is so much more powerful. So I'm actually just starting to scratch the surface of hosting adventure retreats, and I'll give you an example of something like that. I love Guatemala. It is one of the most magical places for me, so I'm starting to set up retreats where I can bring clients into Antigua, central tourism hub, but also take them around to the various volcanoes. And there's like a different energy with each volcano. And it's just like to get them to experience that and then internalize that, providing guided exercises such as, mindfulness meditation. I'm not a yoga instructor, but perhaps bringing a yoga instructor in, getting them through movement and through the actual like hiking and climbing of the volcanoes, getting them to experience the culture. There's various vendors that I'm starting to set up to be able to put this together so they have a truly immersive cultural experience. Yes, to your question, that is something that I'm very interested in doing. I don't currently do it, but as you can hear in the excitement of my voice, it's
Yeah.
something that I think it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And you can go and have these experiences without a travel coach. Of course, you could just be a regular traveler and just go and do these things. But again, it's a specific person who's looking for something that they can't quite grasp by themselves. Those are the folks that will be interested in these retreats that I'm pulling together.
I guess it's in its infancy. So how do you find clients?
Mm. Yeah, so it's primarily through referrals because these are people that are it's like any therapy or psychotherapy. These are people that are obviously in some sort of transition or a fragile state. There's people that again who don't even know that this is what they need, and they might find you through social media or through the SEO that you put together in your website. And so I have to create content to be able to attract that set of people. But then otherwise, it's referrals and people who are kind of like, well, I'm really challenged by this, and it could be as simple as like a woman who is feeling like she's just completely overwhelmed and sitting behind a computer all day long and staring at a screen, and being like, I just need to like not do this, but I don't know how to do something different. And so like it could be that where someone's seeking something and they're kind of like, well, and then they'll find me and I'll be like, well, have you thought about going outside? Like, have you thought about getting out of the cubicle and like what's your idea there? And then people kind of latch on to that and they say, oh, that sounds exciting. Like I've never tried to go hiking in the mountains, or I've never camped, I've never done something outdoorsy, I've never even thought that I could go on a raft down the Colorado River and camp along the way and have a guide that does that. So like helping them connect the dots of like, you're here and you're not very happy about this particular part of where you're at. Here's some different options. Which one of these looks the most exciting to you? And then let's pursue that one. So, a lot of different ways for people to find us. And again, very new in the industry. So, very new in the space in general. To travel is a very old industry, but to have someone come in and say, I'm not going to do your booking for you, but I am going to help you down a spiritual journey of whatever it is that you're seeking, that's a very new concept. And so I think that we have work to do there as coaches and helping educate around what it is that we can provide.
So I assume then that the motivations and the actual experiences vary depending on the person.
Mm. Absolutely. It has to be tailored to what that person wants. We as travel coaches, we have to have some sort of expertise in our area. So we'll focus on what I do, which is adventure travel. I'm not going to be able to work with someone who needs like the relaxation of like a European spa or wine tasting. I don't drink at all. So for me, I'm like, I couldn't send you to wineries in Italy, and that would be unethical for me to be able to try to put that together for a person. I can help them get to a point where they can then maybe work with a travel agent to do that, but I'm not operating in that space. So, yes, everybody has certain things that they come to us thinking that they want. As we dig in, we're kind of like, well, it actually sounds like maybe this is more your speed. Is that true or not? And then get them pointed in the direction if they're not like someone who wants to go and climb a volcano in Guatemala. If they're like, that sounded nice, but it turns out that's actually not what I want. And if it's something I don't specialize in, I do have to refer out.
Do you have any examples of how you've been able to help people, or is that again, is that still in its infancy?
That's in its infancy, but I there is a piece of this that is highly connected to what your audience is interested in. So living in the Bay Area of California, I have a plethora of opportunities to work with people who are working in a digital space and feeling just disconnected to the environment. And so what I've actually done as a baby step for me to getting these retreats pulled together is I've started to take out women who are brand new to backpacking, and they have never, maybe they've hiked, maybe they are just even brand new to hiking, and they're kind of like, ooh, like what if I did this and bit off a little bit more. So I've actually started to lead monthly backpacking trips for women who are new to the sport. The women who come out are just so grateful. At least that's what they tell me. Like they do send me really nice text messages, and just so much, graciousness and gratitude of me saying, hey, this is a hard thing to do as a female. That's a lot of what my content is like how hard it is to do this as a female. But then on top of that, a female who's constantly trapped inside, you're in your car commuting, you're in your, cubicle in your office building. Let's find a way to get you to immerse yourself in nature and feel comfortable with it. And just that little bit of support that I give them for those like 2 or 3 overnighters, depending on how long it is, they're just like, oh, I can do this now. Some of these women have gone off and they're signed up for like other backpacking trips that are, later on in the year. And I think that's great. So I'm giving them that launching pad to be able to feel comfortable with themselves and learn to trust themselves and be brave when you're faced with something like the darkness of the wilderness at night.
How do you assess expectations? Because we're
Mm,
talking about getting people out there, and it's a fantastic experience, and it's a incredible goal. But if somebody were to say to you, "I want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail," and
mhm,
if they're like not fit enough or not well enough, or
mhm.
like, how do you kind of temper their enthusiasm with the realism of maybe this isn't for you?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, unless I had a client that had like an accessibility need, I don't think I would ever say that this isn't possible. What I think is my duty is to help them prepare for it. So we'll take PCT, Pacific Crest Trail, connecting Mexico to Canada. That is a huge feat. If you have a full-time job, you're probably not going to be able to do that. You can do tiny sections of it at a time, but if you're telling me you want to go from Mexico to Canada or vice versa, then if you have a full-time job, are you ready to take that time off? So again, for me having a corporate experience, this is exactly what I would do with this client. I would be working with them on setting up the conversations with their employer for the time off. What does that look like? Is it a leave of absence? Is it a resignation? Are we coming back later? Are we set up for financial independence, so to speak? If you're taking 6 months off, like, are you ready to not have income generated for that 6 months? And then if we assess physical aspects. And so, again, if we're brand new at hiking, I'm probably not going to recommend this to you. What we're going to do is we're going to develop a roadmap that allows you to get used to hiking, get used to backpacking, because they are two different things, very, very different things, even though they are the same activity. Backpacking is different than hiking. Through hiking is different than backpacking. Packing up your stuff every single day is a completely different experience than going and base camping somewhere and like being able to do day hikes. And that's a completely different thing than showing up somewhere in your car in the morning and then leaving in that same car in the afternoon. And so getting them to understand the differences between the two. And it's not to say you can't do it, it's just to say that there's baby steps along the way. So let's build the building blocks to get you there, because if that is a pinnacle dream of yours, then you should chase it. I absolutely believe that people should try to find any way possible, but it could be a really long journey for the person who is just starting out. And I think that it is my duty and responsibility to make them aware of that in a compassionate, empathetic way, but to also not tear down the dream of you're never going to be able to do this, because people will make decisions along the way. And that's a lot of what coaching is, right? Back to the question of like, what does travel coaching do? It's helping them make those decisions and helping them come to their own realizations. And who knows, maybe they go out for their first like week-long backpacking trip and they're like, no, I'm good. I don't need any more than that. That was fun. And maybe they'll come back around to it several years later. Who knows? But getting them to understand their own limits is really my job versus telling them what to do.
And as a part of that, also, obviously, Pacific Crest Trail is kind of local to where you are, or fairly anyway.
Correct. Correct.
But if somebody were to say, okay, I want to do, I don't know, the E9 in Europe, I would assume that
Uh,
a part of what you do is having to research these things
mhm,
and give people options. Do you want to do it alone? Do you want to do it with other people?
mhm.
Is that a part of it? Is giving people like a package of options?
If somebody was to come to me and want to hike a trail in a through hike trail in a area that I am not deeply familiar with, to be totally frank, I would probably try to refer them out. But say I couldn't find a person who was familiar with that. What I'd be working on them with is building their own roadmap for the educational journey that they're going to take to get there. Let's talk Dolomites. I do know Dolomites. A lot of people want to do hut to huts and the Dolomites. How does that work? How do we find a vendor that's going to help you secure the huts? Because my goodness, I can tell you from experience working with these huts is difficult. Some of them only take wire transfers and it takes them like 20 days to get back to you in an email because they live in a remote place. What's the best route for you to take? Like lining them up with that so that, again, they can achieve that dream, but they're kind of like, they're doing the work along the way. So it wouldn't be me necessarily going back to the conversation of a travel agent. I wouldn't be booking their travel for them because I'm not qualified to do that, but helping them understand the steps of how to get there. And I certainly would refer out for an area I was not familiar with, because Kilimanjaro, for example, I don't think I'll ever climb it. I don't think I have any desire to do that. But there's lots of people who have, and lots of vendors that can help them. So I would refer out in that aspect.
I guess there's a lot of different aspects to being in the outdoors.
There are, and maybe I glazed over this too quickly, but to answer the question of, in terms of when a client does come to a travel coach, it is our responsibility to have the discovery session with them to understand what they're after. And sometimes, again, they don't know, and we can see it because you can't read a prescription from inside the bottle, right? So it's like we can see it from the outside and we can see it, well, you're talking about this. And so helping guide them to that. But yes, those questions are always important. Like, why this trail right now? Why this trip right now? What is it that you're feeling? So there's a whole process of intake that a travel coach would need to do. And those questions would probably be addressed during that time so that you can figure out how to best serve that client. If it is, I just want to go there because I want to do the thing, then that's okay. But if it's, I want to transition from a job, a W or a corporate job, like a paid working for somebody else job, to a entrepreneur, that's a whole other journey that we need to dig into and understand, why are we doing this thing to achieve this goal? That's where we would address a lot of those questions, is in that intake process.
On a personal level, what have either trekking or hiking or backpacking, what have they meant to you in your own life?
Oh my goodness. Well, to not have a helpful answer, I would say everything. It means everything to me. I am my client. If I'm totally transparent, I did feel trapped. I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up with parents who worked in tech. I grew up like knowing computers, and maybe some of your audience will get a kick out of like hearing the AOL dial up. Like, I was of that generation. So like for me to be able to separate myself from everything that I've known all my life and go out into wild spaces, go out and hike for a day or backpack for several days, or take on my very exciting adventure at the end of the summer here. Like, it means everything. I have to connect with the wild world because I was born and raised in an environment that is, it wasn't at the time necessarily when I was born, but screens, technology, innovation, which are all important parts of our society. But really truly do disconnect us from the wild world. And I personally need to get out. I did. And part of me leaving my corporate job was to be able to go out and pursue these wild adventures. And I happened to find a second career along the way as a travel coach. So it means everything to me. It really does.
So when you mentioned that AOL thing, it just took me back to when I first, well, like the first few years in Canada, when you would go into one of the big supermarkets, one of the big stores, and they would have AOL discs in big racks as you walked out, and you would pick one up, you could connect,
Yeah.
just stick it in your computer and sign up to AOL with this disc. I'd completely forgotten about those, but that's weird.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
welcome. I love to sprinkle that in every now and then because the people who get it, get it. They're like, oh, yeah, I remember that noise. And that's very much my generation. But my kids don't know. They're like, what? I mean, like, it's so funny. We'll be on a road trip, and my kids, they do have devices that they're allowed to watch on the road trip, but it doesn't have a cellular connection. And so they'll be like, it doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, you're only allowed to play the games that are on the device. You can't just like stream things. They're like, what? And I'm like, you have to have an internet. They're like, there's an internet. They're so confused. So yeah, it's been a wild journey to be a child when the internet first began, and to now see how that's impacting my kids. I think to go back and add to the question that you asked of what does it mean to you, it means that my kids have an opportunity to disconnect too, because I think that we are just I'm a parent who's guilty of it myself, but like we are just so quick to satiate a child with a screen or a device, and they've forgotten how to use a rock and a stick and use their imagination. So a big part of me being out in the wild is taking my family out there because I want them to have that connection too. It doesn't mean that's the only thing that they have in their life. There's a place and a time for technology and certainly entertainment, but I need my children to understand this planet that we live on and the environments, the ecosystems, how they're all connected. I need them to know how that all works and not just watch it on YouTube or whatever the thing is, watch the nature programming. I want them to go and see it. It's great that the nature programming's there, but then I take on the personal responsibility of, okay, great, you're really interested in that. Let's go see that. And we do a lot of family travel based off of some of the stuff that they see. And then I want them to experience it in real life.
What kind of trips have you taken
Mm.
yourself for hiking?
My absolute favorite, obviously, is Guatemala. I did a trip from California to Washington, so a couple states over, and we kind of just like zigzagged back and forth across the volcanic scenic corridor between California and Washington. That was a really cool experience to do with my kids, for them to be able to see. There's this huge, it's in Oregon, there's this huge obsidian field, and you can hike through this obsidian glass. That was a really cool experience for us to be able to again be connected to mountains, be connected to nature. And then being in California, I really do have the Sierras in my backyard, which is, world renowned in terms of hiking. So I'm very spoiled there. But I am very excited about, I will be hiking the Painted Caves Trail in Baja. And that's really exciting for me because that has indigenous aspects. So again, going back to culture and understanding employing indigenous locals to take me to a place that's really sacred for them. Like that is a very exciting upcoming trip that I'm looking forward to. But previously, I've done a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm very lucky and very blessed to have mountains literally 2 miles away that if I wanted to go hike, I could.
Is there a connection between what you love to do and what you've done
Mhm.
and what you're able to provide for others?
Yeah. I would not feel comfortable building these retreats for clients or advising them on their own adventure, if I hadn't done it myself and seen the reward that I have experienced. And so I think for me, it's the easiest to talk about the bravery aspect. Going from someone who worked in Silicon Valley tech, who was very sheltered by these walls and these cars and the freeways and everything's orderly, even though it's busy and it's all orderly, to then go out in the wild by myself, learn to trust myself, learn to be brave. That is, again, in a female in Western society where, there's a lot of messaging that's like, you're not capable. You should be scared. You should have a male companion. Like all this information that we receive as females, that has been incredibly transformational. And that is something that I want to provide for my clients. So is there a connection? Absolutely. I would say that there is. It's just, there's no particular one piece as much as it is just like everything building on top of itself to give me the experience of what I've had up to this point, and therefore I can turn around and provide that to other clients. So yeah, definitely connected. But I would want to encourage people to slow down when they're out there. And what I mean by that is like really immersing themselves. There's simple things where I'll catch myself and I'll be like, oh my gosh, there's bird song I've never heard of. I'm not a birder, by the way, but I do appreciate listening to them. And until that moment of like me slowing down, like I'm not hearing that bird song. And then when I slow down and I'm very mindful about the way I'm doing something when I'm in a wild space, that's where you really get to start to connect with yourself. And so you'll get like folks that are like ultra marathoners and, like these long distance people and like people who want to hike the PCT as fast as they possibly can. Nothing wrong with that by any means. But when we slow down, we get a chance to really truly listen. And I think that that's important because as much as religion takes up a large portion of our society, I think that there's kind of this like cathedral of Mother Earth, so to speak. She's got a lot of lessons to teach us. And I think that slowing down and learning to listen, I think is really, really important. So taking your time.
It sounds like a really rewarding job. I'm not sure that it's one that's cut out for me, though. You definitely need to have a specific personality to be able to guide people through life-changing decisions. But you can tell that Courtney has that skill of relating to people. And it's great that she loves Guatemala. I've never actually been there. The closest I ever came was probably living close to a Guatemalan restaurant in Las Vegas. What a great place that was. Happy memories. So that will just about do it for this week. It's a public holiday again in some parts of the UK on Monday, so maybe another quiet news week, although you never know. And no school on Monday, so no doubt more rain. The weekend looks alright though, so we're busy charging equipment as we speak in the hope that we can go out and do something constructive. If you do have news or suggestions for podcast guests, please do get in touch through jim@walkingpost.com. And as I always mention, we do need guests, whether it's a new trail, a new book, a walking festival, or someone with a story to tell about walking somewhere. So I hope you enjoyed this week's walkingpost.com podcast, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Hopefully with a walk somewhere, whether it's California, Carlisle, or Calgary. Until next time. Happy trails! Walking Post from walkingpost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.